House of Representatives passed a bill criminalizing estimated billing. Nigeria Labour Congress rejects 27,000 naira as new minimum wage approved by the National Council of States. In international news, U.S. Senate to vote on ending government shutdown and border wall funding. And in sports, Super Falcons return from China, prepare for 12-nation tourney in Cyprus.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The Nigeria Labour Congress has rejected 27,000 naira new minimum wage approved by the National Council of States. Former and current leaders at the National Council of States meeting on Tuesday had pegged the new minimum wage at 27,000 naira, 3,000 naira short of the initial figure recommended by the Tripartite Committee on Review of National Minimum Wage, chaired by Ms. Ama Pepple, a former head of service of the Federation. Minister of Labour, Dr. Chris Ngige, says the Council had approved 5 years periodic review. He added that a bill would be sent to the National Assembly on Wednesday to get the necessary legal backing for the new wage. The government says it would pay federal government workers 30,000 naira, while the private sector is to pay nothing below 27,000 naira. Members of the National Council of States include President Muhammadu Buhari, who is the chairman, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, all former presidents, heads of the Federation, all former Chief Justices of Nigeria, President of the Senate, Speaker of the House of Representatives, all the state governors and the Attorney General of the Federation. Lagos State University Teaching Hospital Lasuth Ikeja resident doctors say they will begin 3 days warning strike next week, January the 28th, over shortage of health officers and resident doctors. Association of Resident Doctors President Dr. Fatai Balogun says the association had went on an indefinite strike in September last year to demand for the replacement of the exited health officers and resident doctors in Lasuth. Balogun said that the strike was suspended based on the promises by the management to replace the officers, but said the hospital management and the state government had gone back on their words. Balogun says the shortage of doctors has created loopholes in the provision of optimal clinical service delivery, resulting in a long waiting period by patients and ineffective suboptimal healthcare service. The Code of Conduct Tribunal CCT in Abuja has declined to suspend further proceedings in the criminal charge against the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onohan. The tribunal said in a 2-1 decision it would go ahead to hear the application the CJN filed to challenge its jurisdiction to try him on the 6-count charge entered by the federal government that bordered on his alleged refusal to declare his assets. There was a sharp disagreement between the chairman of the tribunal, Danladi Umar, and another member of the panel, William Agwadze Edzedem, on the legal propriety of going ahead with trial. Despite 4 separate interim injunctions restraining all the parties from taking further steps in the matter, pending the determination of suits before different high courts and the National Industrial Court, Umar says the tribunal is not constitutionally bound by orders from both the High Court and the NIC. The House of Representatives has passed a bill to amend the Electric Power Reform Act that will prohibit and criminalize estimated billing of consumers. The Majority Leader, Femi Gbajabiamila, sponsored the bill in protest against what is called crazy bills electricity distribution companies force their customers to pay. The report set up by the House to the matter was unanimously adopted by the lawmakers after a public hearing in June last year. The report was put in voice notes and the lawmakers approved it overwhelmingly. The House will transmit the bill to the Senate for agreement, and if the upper chamber passes the bill, it will be transmitted to the President to give his assent to it. And still on the House, top management staff of the National Pension Commission and 21 pension funds administrators have been asked to appear before the House of Representatives on Thursday. An ad hoc committee issued the summons on Tuesday as part of an investigation of the alleged sharp practices by pension administrators and custodians. The committee invited the Acting Director General PENCOM, Aisha Daha Umar, and other top executives of the Commission. The pension administrators and custodians mandated with the management of pension funds. The committee is demanding information on the net assets of the contributory pension funds, details of supervisors and regulators of pension funds administrators and their key instructions and performances, compliance and default, details of payments into Treasury single accounts as well as bank accounts operated by the Commission. Senator Dino Melaye has been granted bail after spending 2 weeks in detention. A high court in Abuja had granted his bail on health grounds. Justice Yusuf Halilu said Melaye should be allowed to attend to his health as it could not be arraigned on a stretcher or on his hospital bed. Justice Halilu ordered the senator to present 3 sureties who reside and have property in Abuja, emphasizing that one of the sureties must be the clerk of the National Assembly who would provide a letter attesting that Melaye will always be available for trial. After fulfilling his bail condition, Melaye filed a suit against the Inspector General of Police seeking that the police should not arrest him. The Nigerian Immigration Service says it will unveil the new 64-page passport booklet with a 10-year validity in March. The NRS Public Relations Officer, Sunday James, confirmed to the media that the passport booklet has more than 20 features and will cost 70,000 naira, while the other category of the passport with 5 years validity period will go for 35,000 naira. 4 gas-generating companies, Gencos, have shut down production as a result of their failure to pay gas debts owed Shell Petroleum Development Company and Total, as well as their inability to access fresh loans for gas. Some of the Gencos have now resorted to securing credit facilities from commercial banks to sustain their production. The Executive Secretary, Association of Power Generation Companies, Joy Ogaji, said the power plants shut down production because of lack of access to take loans. Ogaji says the 700 billion naira power assurance guarantee, which the Federal Executive Council approved for the companies in the first quarter of 2017, has been exhausted. But there are hopes that the federal government would make the electricity distribution companies pay at least 80% of their invoices. Coming up, African stories, 19 arrests in Uganda FGM raid. And later, international news, U.S. Senate plans to vote on Thursday on ending government shutdown and border wall funding.
You are watching ANN.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby.
We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward.
Wait, stop.
You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down. Keep walking to the left. Yes.
You're almost here.
Keep going.
You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to stories from across the continent. 19 persons, Muslim men, have been arrested by police in Uganda in an overnight raid for performing female genital mutilation. FGM is illegal in a country with perpetrators facing up to 10 years in prison. Activists that reported the case to the authorities said at least 10 women were about to be caught at a ceremony in Eastern Queen District. Police say prosecutions are not common because most FGM is done in secret and it is hard to find evidence. If the suspects are found guilty, they face up to 10 years behind bars. There are concerns that the number of women being circumcised in the Siberia region in the east of the country is on the rise. Many are believed to be married women who feel pressure from society to undergo FGM. Some feel they face social isolation and are excluded from some cultural activities. Global health officials say 2 cases of polio have been identified in Mozambique as a result of a mutated virus and vaccine. The World Health Organization, WHO, and partners said in a report this week they had confirmed the 2 cases in a 6-year-old girl and one of her contacts, marking another setback for attempts to eradicate the crippling disease. Officials said test results found that they were infected by a virus derived from the oral polio vaccine. That are rare cases, mutate into a form capable of causing new outbreaks. Officials are now facing numerous challenges after repeated deadlines set to wipe out polio have been missed to the remaining countries where the disease circulates. There were dozens of cases in Africa, including Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Somalia last year. The United Nations have criticized European countries on Tuesday for not allowing migrants to disembark at safe ports. Libya's Coast Guard said nearly 500 migrants trying to reach Italy by inflatables had been brought back to the country in different rescue operations since Saturday. Coast Guard spokesman Ayub Kazim said 473 persons trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea have been found. Kazim said Tuesday's figures included more than 140 migrants rescued at sea by the Lady Sham cargo ship, whom the International Organization for Migration said were brought to the western city of Misrata and then to a detention center. The migrants were from different sub-Saharan and Arab countries and included 9 children and 25 women. UN aid agencies had earlier condemned the transfer of migrants to Libyan detention centers in which they say they often face abuse, lack of medical care, rape or forced labor. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees said more than 200 have already drowned in January and more than 4,000 have reached Europe by sea despite bitter cold and great danger. China says it has written off almost $78 million from Cameroon's debt as part of measures to ease economic hardship in the nation. The country's president had gone to China for the 3rd summit of the China-Africa Cooperation in September and pleaded with Chinese authorities to ease Cameroon's debt burden. The sum being waived should have been paid in 2018, but Cameroon failed to pay. Yan Jiechi, a special representative of China's President Xi Jinping, announced the debt relief after a meeting with President Pompeo. Autonomous Sinking Fund, the public entity that manages the Cameroon's external debt, says the country's total debt burden to China stands close to $5.5 billion. Cameroonian economist Aria Getdende says the amount cancelled looks paltry compared to the total debt and says it could actually be for China's long-term benefit for a greater share in the enormous natural resources in Cameroon, which are essential to feed its home industries. President of Sudan, Omar Al-Bashir, is in Qatar on his first trip abroad amid growing wave of anti-government protests that began in his country last month. Sudanese officials say Bashir will be discussing peace process in the restive western region of Darfur. He's also said to be seeking assistance from Qatar that's offered him help as he faces protest the nation is sparked by the country's economic woes. But later, demonstrators were calling on him to step down. Meanwhile, demonstration continued in both Omdurman and Khartoum on Tuesday, the latest in more than a month of escalating protest against the 3-decade rule of President Al-Bashir. Police reportedly fired tear gas as crowds of protesters in the capital's twin city, Omdurman. An Ethiopian government said on Tuesday it had granted amnesty to at least 13,000 people as part of a broad reform agenda pushed by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. In July, members of parliament passed a law allowing people convicted or facing charges of treason crime against the constitutional order an armed struggle to apply for pardons. Ethiopia's Attorney General says more than 13,200 individuals have taken advantage of the law in the past 6 months. Meanwhile, the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator in Ethiopia said earlier this week more aid was needed for 250,000 people displaced in the Benishangul Gumuz and Oromia regions in the country as a result of ethnic violence that surged last year. When we return, international news. U.S. Senate plans to vote on Thursday on ending government shutdown and border wall funding. And later, sports, Super Falcons back in Nigeria, prepare for 12-nation tourney in Cyprus.
You are watching ANN.
If you know it's go internet or follow for Twitter, you know it's not photo send or get it photo send. Now because you the use Palasa, your phone no they answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone when no go for your hand, drop that Palasa phone. Phone when no fit take selfie, drop that Palasa phone. No be correct phone, drop that Palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it known for your hand, that's Palasa phone.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In global news, the U.S. Senate is on a path to resolving a partial shutdown that has lasted for a month now. But there was no sign of relief anytime soon for 800,000 federal workers who are working without pay. Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell laid the groundwork for a vote on Thursday on a proposal by Democrats to fund the government for 3 weeks, but without attaching the $5 billion President Donald Trump is demanding for U.S.-Mexico border wall. The president has opposed similar legislation, and the Senate leader said he would also bring up for a Thursday vote a proposal by Trump to end the shutdown that includes border wall funding and relief for dreamers, people brought illegally to the United States as children.
Proposal outlined by President Trump that we'll consider here in the Senate is the only proposal, the only one currently before us that can be signed by the President and immediately reopen the government.
The President and his team have tried to spin this proposal as a reasonable compromise with concessions to Democrats. That defies credulity.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has told his Turkish counterpart Mevlut Cavusoglu that the protection of allied forces who fought and died battling the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant in Syria must be guaranteed. The U.S. State Department said Pompeo also reiterated Washington's commitment to addressing Turkey's security concern along the Turkish-Syrian border. During the discussion, Pompeo emphasized the importance that the United States places on the protection of forces that work with the United States and the global coalition to defeat ISIS. The U.S.-backed People's Protection Unit, YPG, which spearheads the Syrian Democratic Forces operation, played a key role in the removal of ISIL fighters after the armed group captured vast territory in Syria and Iraq in 2014. The Los Angeles Unified School District and its teachers' union have reached a tentative labor deal that will bring to an end a 6-day strike. The union's members are voting overwhelmingly to approve it. Union members still need to vote on the parts to formally end their strike, which began last week Monday. Union President Alex Caputo confirmed preliminary voting showed that a vast supermajority are voting yes, meaning the strike is over and teachers will be returning on Wednesday. Indonesia's President Joko Widodo has said a scholar linked to the 2002 Bali bombings would only be freed from imprisonment if they pledged loyalty to the state and its secular ideology. The president had declared last week that 81-year-old Abu Bakra would be freed on humanitarian grounds because of his age and health conditions, but advocates and human rights activists have criticized the move. Convicts eligible for early release are required not to repeat their crimes and to pledge loyalty to the state and its secular ideology known as Pancasila. But Bashir's lawyers and the president's legal advisor said Bashir had refused to sign the allegiance pledge. Bashir had told his lawyers that his loyalty was only to God and Islam. Bashir was convicted under anti-terrorism laws in 2010 for links to fighting training camps and was put in jail for 15 years. Bashir is also linked to the 2002 Bali bombings that killed more than 200 people from 20 countries, including 88 Australians. Thailand says it will finally hold elections in March after more than 4 years of military rule. The poll will be the first since generals ousted a democratically elected government in 2014 after months of violent street protests. The Election Commission announced the decision on Wednesday after having postponed the vote dates several times. In December, the Commission said the elections would be held in February, but the military government expressed concern that election-related events would clash with early preparations for the coronation of King Maha scheduled for May. The monarchy is revered in Thailand, and this year's coronation will be the first in living memory for most of the population. Up next, sports. Super Falcons back in Nigeria prepare for 12-nation tourney in Cyprus.
You are watching ANN.
This used to be me. But that was before I got the perfect bag. It's handy and easy to use. All I need in one compact space, just like my MTN Extra Value plan. I used to get one plan for my calls and then try to remember which data plan worked for me. Roaming was a totally different ballgame. Not anymore. I've got the MTN Extra Value all-in-one plan. If you're a data buff like me, you get extra data with some talk time. And if you like to make calls, you get extra talk time with some data. And when I'm abroad, I automatically browse, chat, and call right on the same plan. MTN Extra Value was made just for me.
More of data or calls, whichever one you prefer. MTN Extra Value is made just for you.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in Sport. Super Falcons of Nigeria are expected to return to the country on Wednesday after finishing third at the Four-Nation Invitational Tournament in China. Officials of the Super Falcons have confirmed that the team will immediately start preparations for the Cyprus Women's Cup, which will hold in Turkey from Friday to early March. After the 12-nation invitational tournaments in Cyprus, the Super Falcons will either play Spain or Canada before a final training camp in Austria that could also include 2 tune-up games. Nigeria is the only African country to have featured in all previous editions of the FIFA Women's World Cup since the competition was launched in China in 1991. 41-year-old former Senegal international defender Omar Diaf has extended his contract as coach of French club Sochaux until June 2021. Diaf was appointed coach of the second division side last December, and the former French champions are currently just 2 points above the relegation zone in League 2 with 17 games left this season. Earlier this week, Sochaux signed former Liverpool and Mali midfielder Momo Sissoko. They have played 14 seasons for Sochaux across 2 spells, previously coached the club in an interim capacity in 2013 and 2015. That is NN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other stories, visit our website, ennafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ENN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.